All right. I'm ready to go right now. I am amped. All right. You're probably watching this later. You can check the description, but just so you know, I'm doing this one early because I have family visiting. It's pretty rare. It actually essentially never happens, but that's the deal. And I couldn't miss 2 shows in a row. I just literally couldn't do it. My soul, my psycho-physical constituency could not handle it. And I was going to pre-record it. I was just about to pre-record it actually, but then I remembered if you do that, when you upload it, it takes like an hour to like approve it or whatever. So I thought I'd just do it live. So presumably you're not watching this live, but that's the deal. And if I sound distracted, it's because I'm putting the link on Twitter really quick, but then I'm going to lock in and we're just going to do this. Hold on 1 second. I could trim this, but honestly, I'm not going to. I'm going to be totally real with you. You know, we do it a very free form situation here. And once I confirm that everything is up and running, I'm just going to do this right now. It should be a pretty good time. We're doing an atypical show. It looks like it's happening. Let me just make sure one more time because I don't want to do the whole show and then realize that it's not working. But it is. And that means it's about time. Let's go. All right, let's do it really quick. I just got a note that the audio bitrate, I'm probably just gonna ignore this. I think it's all good. Let's just go for it. Okay, I'll hold up 1 second. I'm just looking really quick and perfect. Okay, so here's the deal. You just watched the intro. Doing this atypically, normally last show of the month is call-in show in the chat. I love it. It's actually probably my favorite show of the month. We're talking, we're vibing, I'm taking your suggestions. We're making an image together, and honestly, it's a great time, and everyone loves it. But the thing is, I wanted to do something a little bit different. It's been a little bit of chaos mode here, like I said, and I thought I would lean into that. I see we have 1 person in the chat. A few people in the chat. Word up. What's up, guys? How's it going? Okay, so I figured I'd do it a little bit differently this time. I was setting up my paints and everything, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna try and squeeze it in right now. But, you know, part of the show is about meta creativity, and I think that when, you know, your studio, your practice, maybe you're a musician, whatever it is, when it's going a certain way, it's kind of better to just lean into it. So I kind of figured what we would do is I have an idea in my head right now, and I kind of want to just go as hard as possible. I'm going to time myself actually. I literally have the timer right here, and I want to see how far I can get in terms of taking a relatively complicated idea, I guess you could say it that way, and putting it on paper. So we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. And if people don't like it, it's fine, because this probably won't happen again. But that's what we're going to do right now. So here's my idea. I was looking at the comments. I posted last night pretty late. You know, we're not doing the chat thing. If people want to comment ideas for symbols, themes, and things like that, let me know. And a few people commented, not too many. It was pretty late at night. But one person mentioned snakes. One person said, I don't really care what it is. I just want to hear about the baby. I thought that was funny. And I was thinking about a baby art theme that perfectly relates to the show recently. I was at a party and there were lots of pregnant women there. That's part of my life now, I guess. It just happens. And I was looking at my wife and this woman who were pregnant, and they were standing there talking. And there's a Renaissance art theme. It's called the Visitation. In case people don't know, we'll do a little casual explanation before we hop into the picture making. In case people don't know, in Renaissance art, there are lots of different themes. Not just Renaissance art, actually, really in Christian art in general, you could say. But it really crystallizes in the Renaissance, in my opinion. Probably a little bit before that. There are different themes that you get going on. So you get the deposition, people taking Christ down from the cross. You get the crucifixion, probably pretty obvious what that is. You get the Annunciation. People know images like that where you have Mary and the angel visiting her, telling her she's going to bear Christ. And different artists will do their takes on those themes. So you have, here's Da Vinci's Annunciation. Here's Pontormo's Annunciation. Here's Parmigianino's Annunciation. Here's this guy's Annunciation. Everyone hits these like themes throughout their career, basically, either based on what they're commissioned to do. Actually, that's pretty much always it. Or if they're doing a painting for a church or someone who needs it, X, Y, and Z. And then there's a lot of lesser known themes. And one of those, I mean, you might know about it, but most people don't, let's say, is the Visitation. And the Visitation it's in the Bible, when Mary visits, I'm blanking on St. John the Baptist's mother's name. I want to say Anne, but that's Mary's mother's name. St. John the Baptist's mother's name is, I'm blanking, I'm a painter, it's not a big deal. When Mary is pregnant with Jesus, St. John the Baptist's mom is pregnant with him, and they literally visit each other, and John the Baptist is like leaping in the womb because he can sort of sense that Christ is there, basically. Fun fact, actually, based on that, and a few other things in Scripture, you can actually work backwards to figure out when Christ is born in the year, because it says how old John the Baptist is in relative to fetal infant Jesus still in Mary. Someone says Elizabeth. Yeah, it's Elizabeth. Nice. So anyway, that's a theme, and it's a really cool theme, I think, in sacred art, because you have these two pregnant women, and they're just kind of visiting each other, and they're touching each other, and basically they're just being kind of, not to be flippant, not to be disrespectful, but they're being kind of like giddy and happy about the fact that they're two pregnant people together, and it's kind of nice. And I've seen some pretty weird variations on that theme. There's one that comes a little bit after the Renaissance where they're standing together, but if you look at the ground, they're almost in this like giant city. Like they're giant and they're in like a tiny city compared to them. You can see like little buildings and they're really, really big. After the Renaissance, people kind of start working with these weirder pictorial themes to mix it up a little bit. But normally it's just them standing, touching each other. Usually it's Elizabeth touching Mary's stomach. And I've seen one where it's a sculpture, and it's like a medieval sculpture, so it's carved and it's painted, but it's pretty awesome, actually. I'm going to pull a piece of paper over here, because they're standing talking to each other, right? So you have two wooden sculptures, and then their stomachs, instead of being just rendered as pregnant, are carved away, and on the flatness is painted in two little infants. And then over this is set a big piece of crystal. There's this big like clear crystal set over them. So when you go see the sculpture in real life, you're looking through this like watery crystal, which oddly actually kind of perfectly fits, the stomach of a pregnant woman, right? And you're looking through and you're seeing the painted infant through this crystal. It's probably my favorite variation on the Annunciation. It's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Maybe I'll put it in the description. It's not very well known, but I like it because it's so weird. And I was thinking about this, and as I've come along the pregnancy, I've learned a lot about that kind of thing. Women being pregnant, naturally, it's been a topic here at the studio. And one really interesting visual thing that I learned is that it's ideal for the baby to actually be upside down in the woman's stomach. We're doing like an atypical episode here. I'm going to draw it actually a little bit. Normally I don't like sketch on the show, but so here you have the woman. So lovely. Thank you for carrying the baby. We really appreciate it. And then you have her body, which I will elongate here for the purpose of this drawing. And you have the stomach, right? So I think most people, at least me here, we'll make her a little prettier just because she's being our demonstrator. Give her a little necklace. Thank you so much for being here. I would picture it, here's the baby, right? And that's normally, I think, how you see the baby in like images and stuff. and they're in there like this, right? That's actually not ideal. Ideally, the baby is actually upside down in here, which I thought was pretty interesting. You don't see it in there, obviously, but that's how it's ideally to be. And if it's not, it starts to be kind of a big deal. In fact, if the baby's born right side up, I learned this recently, it's called being born breech. It's kind of a big deal. You can probably imagine it's a lot easier to get the baby out head first than it is feet first, right? Naturally. And it's really crazy, actually, because the woman's hip bones, her pelvic bones, are almost designed like a corkscrew. I should get like a bone one. We should like go over it here sometime. But they're actually designed almost like a corkscrew. So when the baby's going through, it's actually designed by God, by the way, to spiral through. And the baby gets in this position and spirals through and comes down through the pelvis. And that's part of how you can get such a large creature out of such a small opening. I thought that was really awesome. And the kid that I'm having, Owen Jr., has been upside down the whole time. So we've had nothing to worry about. That's really cool. Put his little face in here. So anyway, I was thinking about this, and something about these two themes together was started cauldroning up in my brain, because I was thinking, it's so interesting. The woman is right side up, but the baby's upside down. So the baby's living its whole life upside down. So I was thinking, I'm going to grab another piece of paper right here. What I want to try and get down on paper right now is I was thinking it'd be cool. Sometimes I like taking spiritual themes and things like that and almost, I don't want to say abstracting them. That's sort of a generic, really unclear word to use, but almost doing a symbolic interpretation of them or just riffing on it. Riffing is really the perfect word, making a musical analogy. So what I was thinking was, we're not going to draw, Mary and Elizabeth and stuff, but I thought it would be interesting to have, so I guess we're going to start like this. So we'll have one woman on this side, right? I don't know exactly how we'll draw it in. And we'll have her, she's right side up, right? And we'll have this kid upside down. I don't know exactly what style we're going to go for here. I think we're going to go for like a really intense drawing style because it's sort of an atypical week. Might as well lean into it. And on the other side, we'll have the opposite. We'll have the baby right side up and the woman upside down. And I thought something about this would be really interesting visually because there's a lot of variables here. If we put something in the center, if we have their hair, maybe we could have their hands touching. That's like kind of interesting. And then for the border on the outside, like I said, someone in the comments mentioned a snake. I was like, that's really cool. I haven't used a snake in a minute. It got a little cliche for me, but now I'm obviously bringing it back. It's like one of the most preeminent Christian visual themes. But I didn't want to just loop it in a snake because then that's like kind of nefarious, like Ouroboros alchemy style or whatever. So what I was thinking was maybe if it works out, what we'll do is we'll have this side of the snake normal, just a full snake. And then this side, we'll have it like cut up, like the slain snake. Obviously Mary's seed, her child in there, is the one who ultimately like defeats the snake. And then this could be cool because maybe we can do something cool with the blood. We could draw it in like radiating out. That would be cool. Maybe we'll pointillist it in a little bit. So we got a lot of options there. So it's pretty fuzzy in my brain. That's about exactly as far as I got actually. And I thought we could just do a drawing of that. I also wanted to do a drawing one because part of the theme of the show is promoting other people drawing. And, I've mentioned this a few times, but I have all these fancy tools here, but sometimes I think that makes it seem like, oh, you need the fancy tools to do something cool. So I thought it would be interesting to take a stab at just doing pure drawing, just the straight up drawing. I'm not even going to pencil it in, probably. I don't have a compass or anything fancy. We're just going to go, maybe even with one pen, we'll just go all the way through and see what happens. And I didn't really plan on people being here in the chat, but I'm very happy that you're here. That's cool. So if you want to talk, if you want to ask me anything, you can. If you want to say anything, I can check it out. But that's cool. I almost recorded it alone, by myself. How sad that would have been. Okay, so I'm going to just move a few windows around right here. It's raining here, by the way. We'll set the tone. And what's interesting, drawing-wise, we'll get into it as we're going, but when we're painting, sometimes I talk about the texture, and we have a few different texture options. I've used the term dry brush, like when the brush just rubs against the paper and you see the texture of the paper there, or maybe we've talked about more watery stuff or building up the texture. But with a pen and drawing, it's not always intuitive how to deploy different textures. So it would be cool if we could get that going. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but it would be cool if we can get that going. And let's just start it. I'm just going to calibrate myself a little bit so I know exactly how much room I have over here. Perfect. So I'm seeing how much room I have on the top and bottom so I know how far I can go with the camera. Although we might zoom out even. We might even zoom out a little bit. Let's see how it goes. So let's see, first of all, so this is a really easy way if you want to sort of step up your drawing or just get into drawing, is getting something like this. People ask me all the time, Owen, what should I get? And you could just roll pen style. Nothing's holding you back. You know, if you have literally like $3 in your bank account, we've all been there. You could just get a pen. It's not really a big deal. But if you want to buy something, this is pretty cool because people that do art know what this is. People that don't. These are microns, and basically the deal is it's technically called a pigment liner if you want to be really fancy. But the pen ends in like a nice felt tip, and it's going to have different thicknesses in here. This is the thickest one, and actually I'm kind of feeling like even though it looks pretty good on the camera, this might be too thick for us. Maybe we'll zoom in a little bit more and do like a little bit more of a detailed drawing because I want to feel like I have a point at the end. I don't want to feel like I have a ball at the end. Here we go. This is a little bit smaller. I think maybe we'll go with this. I think maybe we'll go with this one. Let's see. Let me like calibrate a little bit and see how good we could go with the 8 one. Yeah, we'll go with this. I want it to be thick enough to read on camera. Although normally, just for the record, just, you know, as long as we're just hanging out talking casually a little bit. I spent a long portion of my life only using the 005, which is the smallest one here. And you can see it's actually like insanely thin. It's truly like a razor blade here. And I spent a long time only using this. Eventually I wanted to beef it up a little bit, but maybe like a whole year of my life I spent only just drawing with the finest tip. And it gets kind of obsessive because, you know, you're on the train and you can like zoom in super far and all of a sudden you're putting in these like tiny details that basically no one's gonna ever notice in your pictures, but it's good. It's actually good to do that. But we'll roll with the 5. We'll compromise with reality a little bit here. And yeah, if anyone hasn't been here before when we have the chat, if you @ Owen Cyclops, then I'll actually see it. So Tired Teller, his comment is highlighted, but otherwise, you know, people talk to each other. I like that, fostering a sense of community, but I'm not gonna see it unless you tag me. So I'll get started and then I'll see if anyone said anything in the chat. So, walking through the whole sketch process here, it's a little difficult with this one because normally I start from the center and radiate out. That's a really easy way to naturally build up the image, but I don't know exactly what I want to have in the center. We could just lock it in and I could say, okay, let's do this, but I kind of don't want to do it that way. So we're gonna make a little bit of a risky maneuver. I think it'll pay off though. And what I'm gonna do, can you even see it? Perfect. So I'm just gonna put these dots. And this is actually how I often calibrate what I'm doing if I don't have a compass. So maybe you don't have a compass. Compass not like your Lost in the Woods compass, but a compass like a making circles compass. And I guess this is about halfway. It doesn't need to be perfect, but I do this because this way when I'm getting really, really into the details and really stuck in one part, I know, let's see, about, so I'm sort of imagining a circle. You can see it's already not perfect, but it's not a big deal. Cool. So this way when I'm leaning over here, I know that I'm getting to the edge of this like circle that I've imagined. And I actually might even put just one more on the outside. When you get really into detailed drawing, it's almost characterized by a lack of like larger awareness. So let's say in a minute, you know, I'm drawing in like a necklace on this girl, you kind of lose the spatial awareness that you generally have. So that's why I did that. And these are just dots, so I can always incorporate them into the image later. It's not really gonna matter. So what I'm gonna do is, I can already see I made the circle kind of too small, but it's not a big deal. So what I'm gonna do is, I think I'm gonna have their hands meeting here in the middle. That sounds kind of cool. It might be kind of cheesy, so we're gonna wing it a little bit. But I'm really just trying to figure out how to start right now. I'm just gonna go for it and throw down the woman on the left's body. Let's just go for it here. And I'm already making a lot of calls. So in the very beginning, it's like you're planting the seed of the drawing and the calls kind of reverberate out. You don't want to get too stuck in your head about it, but it does. matter. So for example, already when I'm coming down here, it's going to affect the vibe of the drawing if I throw in her breast or not. I think I am going to, because I am anticipating not putting in her head, and I want to make 100% sure that it reads as a body. So I'm going to do that. We're going to come down here. We'll come down here and just kind of put it in, not like gratuitously, but it is, you know, she's a pregnant woman, so she has breasts. And then we'll come down and just kind of naturally put it in like that. And then I think we'll have it almost like she's in a dress. That looks perfect. It's literally perfect, actually. Great. I'm just going to push this paper up a little bit. Dope. Okay. And I kind of want to work equally on both sides. Actually, I could flip the paper over. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to come up here, put in her neck, and then maybe we'll get her face in, maybe we won't. I can't really tell. But we'll start with this opening right here. Perfect. Perfect shape. Nice. And I guess already, again, we're making like a lot of calls right now. The style of the infant that we put in here, I can't really tell how we should do it. So I'm going to move over here and throw in the other woman. Oh, I guess I'm going to turn the page upside down. Perfect. Let's just do it that way. Cool. Cool. Stick with me here. The drawing will take off in a minute, but I want to make sure I lay the bones at the very beginning as confidently as possible, because that was going to obviously affect everything else. Oh, I didn't start my timer. Boom. Okay, cool. Called it the speed run, right? Might as well do it that way. So we'll come over here, put in her neck, and we'll come down with the shoulder. And I'm going to try and put it in the same way as I just did over here. And we'll come down. Perfect. They're already kind of like perfectly mirroring each other. Great. It's literally perfect. Okay, and I want to make it about the same size as the other one. I can already tell when you're doing a drawing, it's actually best to not really have it planned out too much, because this is very like Sun Tzu, Art of War. But if you have a plan, then things can go not according to plan. But if you have no plan, then things can never go wrong. Does that make sense? I had this younger artist that was like really into my drawings at one point in time. She was a friend. It's not like I had like a super fan or something. And she was like, wow, when I watch you draw, you like never make a mistake. And I said, that's because I have no plan. If you have no plan, you don't make mistakes, right? Those two things go hand in hand. So I can already tell, you know, I was thinking of the circle, but I don't think it's going to end up being in a circle. It might end up being in an oval. That's kind of cool, because then these are ovals. Maybe ovals becomes like kind of the theme or something. So we'll see what happens. And I think we're going to go with like the bigger sort of simplified figures that I often draw. But since we're pushing the drawing thing and we're not doing a painting, maybe I'll go a little bit more detailed than I normally do, which means that here I'm going to give the baby a little hand. Probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but we'll change the vibe up a little bit. Maybe we'll have him kind of like reaching out also to the other baby. And I'm going with the kind of like paw hands, because then I can just come in here, boom, boom, boom. Sort of as like medieval style. I could paint the fingers in, but I feel like when you're doing a black and white drawing, controlling the level of detail is really the biggest factor. And you don't want it to get too like smooshy. You don't want it to get like sloppy. You want it to really have clean, clear is really the operative word, clear details. You can imagine if I'm coming in and painting like each finger, I don't know, maybe someone else's style would work really well, but I just feel like it wasn't the move. And already here, you know, maybe I made his body a little bit big so we could put some other stuff inside it. So I'm just going to roll with it. And I can just put his leg up like this, give him a little bit of, you know, a calf and a thigh and stuff. And actually, I'm just going to roll with what's naturally happening and put his foot back like this. I think that'll look cool. Perfect. That looks dope. And then we have options in terms of, are we putting a face? Are we rendering like the organs and stuff like that? That might be a little bit creepy for a baby, going hard with the organs. But I'm going to put in a halo. So this is going to be our first texture that we're dropping in, which is the dotted line. I might do a whole series on sketching and like keeping a sketchbook and stuff, but the dotted line, you can get a lot of mileage out of it. Maybe I'll bring the camera down a little bit. Let's experiment with a few things this episode. Normally I do everything the exact same way all the time, and it's great and everyone loves it, but let's change it up a little bit right here. I'm gonna see if I just need to refocus the camera every time I do that, because then I might not do it too much, but we'll see. It's nice having a little bit of a casual, and then normally when I focus the camera, just in case you were wondering, I have writing out here and I try and see when I can read the writing the best. So just real quick, probably won't move the camera too much if I have to refocus it every time, but might as well do it once or twice. Perfect. And I did that because already what I'm going to do right now is set up a little bit of the graphic style. So we are trying to do this as quickly as possible, but that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice, you know, the total quality of it. And I'm going to throw down these dotted lines here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the thicker pen, and sometimes what I do is fill it in. Yeah, perfect. With these dots. And you get a lot of mileage out of this because you can see if you come in with the dots, it really looks like it takes forever. Like someone looking at a drawing that you've shaded in this way is immediately going to be like, wow, you know, this took a lot of time subconsciously. But it actually doesn't take that much time. It takes about as much time as it would take to shade it in with lines or cross hatching or something like that. But it gives it way more of a sophisticated look. Also because you can control the density. So I made those pretty dense. Here, I'm going to come in and make them not so dense, which means that I'm just putting more space in between them. You can see it doesn't really take that much time at all, but it has the appearance of taking a lot of time. Oh, I didn't put this other barrier back here. So already, it's looking pretty good. It's already looking pretty good. And what I'm thinking about in my mind is I'm thinking about other stuff that we're going to do. I talk about this in the painting show a lot, but when you're painting, sometimes I make the comparison that painting is like doing an orchestra or something. And then drawing is like just sitting at a piano. There's so many variables when you're painting. It's hard to zoom in and focus on one thing. But what I'm thinking about as I'm doing this is all the opportunities I have to make interesting decisions. So I don't want to let those go without thinking about it. For example, I could add a border around here, which I am going to do. Actually, I'm just going to do that right now while we're talking. And I'm going to throw it down with the dots. And you can see, like I said, for me, it just has like such a sophisticated, nice look to it. It really makes it seem like a really like advanced drawing. I don't know. So I'm just going to come around here. And I went with these bumps because they have kind of like a delicate, lacy kind of feel to them, I guess. Almost like a doily or something. So it fits the pregnancy thing very well. And I'm wondering if I should come around and put dots around the outside, but I don't want to cram it up too much. I'm a little bit focused in here already, so we're not going to do that just yet. For the face, I want to make it look nice. We always do like, sometimes we do like creepy, weird, like freaky, kind of like weird, trippy, spiritual stuff. But let's just make this one look nice. Although I am going to come in and put the brain in, just because that's kind of cool. But I'm not going to make it the weird cloud-shaped brain that I always do. We'll just make it like a nice shape. And we'll make this the darkest density of the dots. Almost like you can't even tell if I colored it in or just put in the shading. Perfect. Oh, this looks dope already. Nice. We'll put in the heart also. I'm always torn if I should put in like the anatomical heart or the drawing of a heart. But since it's a baby pregnancy, you know, it's kind of already kind of cute. This is a little bit more cute than we normally do. So I will toughen it up and add some kind of weird stuff on the outside. But we'll put in the drawing of the heart. Maybe that's it. I could put the bones in, but that's kind of like creepy, don't you think? So for now, let's just roll with that. That's looking pretty solid. Let's turn it upside down and see where we're at right here. Just so you guys know also, since I guess this is the insight into the drawing aspect of what I do, if I ever do anything cute, that actually is part of my internal monologue. I'm like, okay, I have to do something kind of tough now to balance it out. Okay, perfect. So I'm also wondering here if I'm gonna come in and I really wish I had the border in already, but I don't. So I'm kind of just rolling with that. I'm going to come in and throw in some kind of like necklace. And I'm going to put it on this kind of like longer beaded chain. Part of the game here is going to be selectively deploying details. So this is one option. And I could come back in. What I might do is come back in and shade them in. I don't know what I'm going to put on the end of it because I'm not sure exactly where we're going with this yet. I'm really just delaying the fact that we're going to need to put in a border because then we can really work freely, but I'm delaying it right now. Let's put in the other baby here. And whenever you have two things in an image, you immediately have the question of, are they going to match or are they going to be somewhat oppositional or what? There's no right or wrong answer, but you do have to address it naturally. You don't want it to just be unaddressed. I think I want them to be different. So I'm going to put his hand down here. We'll put his body coming out. He's set up in a little bit of a different way. And instead of having the two legs out like 1, 2, we'll have him sitting kind of like this style. That's perfect. And we'll give him the closed eyes. We'll give him the same brain. And something I talk about a lot when we're painting is the fact that ideas come about from working. So already I'm kind of thinking, I was thinking about their connection, the moms like holding hands or something, but it might be cooler if we give the babies kind of like a psychic connection or something, or some like spiritual connection between them. That might be a little bit more interesting. I said in the beginning, but I thought them holding hands, maybe it would be a little bit like Hallmark card, kind of like cheesy style. It's not really what we're going for here. Perfect. And for the border, I'm going to do this border differently. I'm going to put kind of like not flames, but these just, I don't want to say generic, but just these like, more like light spikes, I guess is how I think of these. Coming around the outside. Perfect. We'll come down over here. Perfect. Come up this way. And I guess for the background, could do the same background. I'll do it the same so they match. Come up over here. Before I start doing the dots, I'll pick up a question. Okay. Perfect. If I missed your question, feel free to ask me again. Someone asked me, I'm going way far back up, probably too much. I'm reading the Philokalia. Have you read it? It's a bombshell spiritually. No, I haven't read it. That's like one of the most classic, I don't know if it's a full-on prayer book, right, in Orthodoxy, but no, I haven't read that, but I would like to. Honestly, what I've been reading right now, perfect moment to talk about what I've been reading. I've just been trying to go through the Bible, but it's taking me forever to just get through Genesis because every second, I said I was going to do this differently, but I made it the same so they match. Because every second I am stopping to research literally everything, and it's so much. Like I just got through Cain and Abel, and I hit all this really cool stuff about Cain and Abel. And finally I start the car up again, I'm getting going again, and then boom, I hit the flood. And that's like a whole nother world of stuff to research. So I'm kind of torn. I'm wondering if I should just power through and not keep stopping at every interesting turnoff on the highway, if that makes sense. Or if I should just accept that that's the nature of how I read things. And I don't know, I can't really tell. But I've been reading Genesis, and I want to just get out of the Pentateuch. That's the part of the Bible I'm probably the most familiar with. The Pentateuch being the 5 books of Moses, that being, in case people don't know, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. That's definitely the part of Scripture that I'm the most familiar with. I guess that's probably the case for most people, that or the Gospels. But I want to get out of there. If I was to paint my understanding of Scripture in terms of pure, story information, that part is pretty clear. I could tell a little kid about what happens in there. And I'd feel pretty good about it. But after that, it gets really fuzzy, and I have a lot of floating islands. Like once we get to it's kind of gray. It's like, yeah, someone takes armies somewhere. I get it. And then there's kings later, like Solomon and David. If I had a little kid, I couldn't exactly explain the connection off the cuff without like looking into it first, honestly. I mean, I know what the connection is, but I couldn't tell it as one cohesive story. Okay, perfect. Okay, these guys look dope. And already I'm thinking about their connection here. That's kind of like an interesting part of it. So there's one other thing happening here as we're working along. I might bump up the contrast on the camera, but I don't really want to stop. Is contrast. So when you start working with textures in a pen and ink drawing, you run into the danger of not having a really, really high level of contrast. In the paintings, you can get away with it because you have color everywhere. So, you look at a Monet painting, sometimes they don't have a high level of contrast, contrast being the maximum difference between the light and the dark. But in an ink drawing, you really need that because it's black and white. It's like a black and white photo. Imagine a black and white photo that's low contrast. It's not really ideal, generally. You want a lot of contrast. So what we're going to do right now, and I remembered that we're supposed to be going very quickly, so I'm just going to go for it here, and I am just going to... Nice. I was really worried that wasn't going to connect, I'm not going to lie to you. Perfect. And I'm going to use a motif that I've been using a little bit recently, which is the night sky. Normally I don't use it because I think it kind of looks a little bit like space, maybe. I'm going to grab the big pen here because we're already at 13 minutes, and just wanted to see how fast we could do this. And this is going to be this dark night sky. I've been using it recently because it's like they're making a connection across the darkness. I've been using it for halos. I did this image of Adam recently. I did one on the show, but then I beefed it up a little bit and did an actual like graphic image of it. And I like using the darkness of the night. It just is a really great implication, and it's very Genesis, the night sky, like looking out at the darkness and the vastness of the universe. I'll throw in a few stars in here. Anyone ask me anything else? Wings on the snake, make it like a seraphim. You can make the belly like skull. I'm gonna keep up with the chat. If I missed it, just send it again. Someone said, do you not see psychedelics as offering any insight into Christianity? Yeah, it's interesting. We could talk about that. It's interesting. I'm going to take a meta approach to your question because I got invited back on to break the rules to talk about psychedelics with this guy who his like whole thing is psychedelics. And it's interesting. Speaking of the kids and everything, I'm having a kid, obviously. I kind of feel like, I don't want to say I feel like cured of my need to argue with people because not the person that asked me this. But it's interesting, like a tangent. I kind of feel like, I don't know, when I did the first Break the Rules stream with that guy, Daniel Pinchbeck, and we argued about psychedelics, before I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Like, let's do this, man. I was so amped up. But he invited me back on. I'm probably going to do it. So I like them. I like the show and everything. They're cool. But I'm kind of like, people that are really into psychedelics, I don't want to say I'm like cured of the need to like argue with them, but I am kind of like, well, I feel like all I can do is like present my angle, and then people are going to do whatever they want, Do I think of it as in what was the question? Having any insight into Christianity? Not really, honestly. I could explain why, I guess, but not really. I guess it gives you some, if I was going to be charitable, maybe it gives you some aspects of insight into the mind and stuff, but I don't really think so. The people I know that are really into psychedelics don't really have like special insight into like religion, in my opinion. That would be like previously myself included and stuff. So not really. To make it more interesting, I've talked about that a lot. We could talk about it if people really want to press me on it. But I think that if I was to boil it down into one sentence, I think the connection between psychedelics and religion is not a presupposition that I totally take for granted anymore. I watched a lot of movies and documentaries and stuff all about psychedelics and stuff. And I feel like that leap from like, here's this thing, okay, to this is kind of where religion comes from. That's where I would press someone if we were having like an argument about it or just talking about it. That's where I would press someone because I don't think that connection is like totally valid. We could, take dreams, for example, and say, well, people have dreams. They have these crazy thoughts in their dreams. Maybe that's where religion comes from, and build a whole case that's like just as good. So no, not really, to be honest with you. No. What I'm currently doing is ignoring my own mental rabbit trails and looking at the writings of saints to get their consensus, lessening myself. Yeah, it's interesting, man. Yeah, I've been going really hard into more debates and stuff, honestly. I kind of hit a wall with the debates where I feel like I hit a lot of the big ones, and now I don't want to say I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel, but I am just listening to like random people argue about stuff. Okay, cool. So we got this night sky in here. I actually am going to, as long as we're doing like a little bit of a casual episode, I feel like it's not dark enough, the black. So I am literally just going to reach in the camera. Can I pump up the contrast? There we go. That already looks a little bit better. That looks better. We'll just do like a super high contrast one. Perfect. There's a gain knob, but I don't want to mess with that. There we go. That looks good enough for me. Looks better. Okay. So we got this here. We got options now because now we got the high level of contrast we're looking for. And we're zoomed in. We're going to zoom out. Don't forget that. But I really feel like I need to commit and put them into a frame or into something if we're going to keep moving this forward at the pace that I want. So that is what's going to happen right now. We got a few options there. I thought we'd go circle style with the snake, but I don't know, man. I don't really see that happening. It's just not very circular, you know? I could just make some power moves and just choose a shape and just go with it. Let's see. I'm only hesitating because this is going to be like a big factor in how successful the drawing is. I'm kind of just going to go for it. I'm just going to go for it here. So I'm going to throw down this line and I'll build it the same way from the top and bottom. And by the way, this is how I would like draw in my sketchbook and stuff. Oh, cool. I thought it was like crazy tilted, but it's actually just the camera. Okay. Could go octagon, but octagon really reads like stop sign in this culture for very obvious reasons. Could go with the bubbles, like a shape called a quatrefoil if you want to look it up, but I don't want to do that. You know what I'm thinking would be the most interesting thing is to do something like this. I'm going to come down here. Perfect. We'll come down like that. I don't need this to be perfect. I am leaning into the imperfect drawing aspect of this while I'm doing it. So just so you know, I'm not worried about like the perfect geometric shapes or anything like that. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lock into that kind of, sometimes I see this shape called a lozenge in art history. It's kind of a weird term, right? But that's why I see it called sometimes. I'm going to lean into this lozenge shape. That looks really good. And then we'll come back and see what we want to do. That gives us a few options now. I think I am going to put in the bottom of this woman's head. Not any of her features, but that's going to allow me to address one other problem I wanted to hit, which is this space in here, because now that I have her face up here, I can use her hair. And I am going to do that. And I'm just going to come down, boom, and put in this long hair. And this is going to give me another texture. Sometimes I dig in to a hair texture or like a fur texture or something. I think I literally spent years of my life just doing like ink drawings like this of women, so I've really thought about all the variables, I think. And sometimes I dig in here, but it gives it a little bit of a 70s feel sometimes. Nice, that's exactly what I wanted. But I just want it to be flat because I don't want it to be calling attention to itself. When you put variance in, variance being the fact of variation, that's like you're telling the viewer's eye, hey, look at this, this is important. Whereas if I just put it in like this long hair, it kind of reads as like a background pattern. It's like an instrument in the background. Oh, perfect, dude. This is looking great. And then I'm going to put one layer of like reverberation off this darkness here. I don't know if I'll make it a full-on like gradation out of the darkness, but we'll see. I'm going to put in their clothes and their jewelry, and then we're going to see what we need to do. What we need to do with that. Is there anything else I've been reading that's interesting? Oh yeah, not really. I've just been going really hard on the theodicy thing, honestly, man. Normally in the show, at some point, we do talk about what's been on my mind recently, and it's really just been the congruence, the, what's the word I'm looking for? The Venn diagram overlap of free will, but God knows the future, but the problem of evil, all in like a little tight loop. And I've just been thinking about that a lot, man. I am not really sympathetic to Calvinism at all. I know some people that watch the show identify as Calvinists or are downstream from that. That's totally cool. But I think part of what listening to all those debates really got me thinking about was that Calvinism does have like a sturdy footing in some ways in terms of, well, yeah, God knows the future, and that means the future is written, so you don't really have free will, and it's all basically set in stone. I don't feel that way, and honestly, I'm never gonna capitulate to that because it just goes against a lot of like my basic observations. But in terms of having a firm footing and being like, well, yeah, here's A, here's B, and then here's C, it does add up if you're just doing that, if you're not meshing it with, the empirical experience of having free will, which I think is really dependable, and everyone has that every day. So I'm kind of just trying to work around that, man, and see what I really think that all means, basically. I keep coming to the tight thought loop of like, well, if God knows the future, then the future's set in stone, and that means that I can't change it, which means that I don't really have free will, but I already just explained that I empirically do have free will. I'm going to color in these necklaces to give them opposite angles. And how far are we on our speed run? We're at 23 minutes. I thought we'd go for an hour, so let's see. Pick it up a little bit if we're really doing it as a speed run. So yeah, I've just been trying to figure out what I think about that. I found some weird, interesting stuff. There is something called open theism. Any idea that I talk about right now, I'm not presenting as something that you should think, obviously. There's something called open theism, which is kind of this idea basically that God doesn't really know the future, which I thought was interesting, but then you're pretty firmly outside the bounds of classical theism. If you start saying, well, God doesn't really know the future, then you're pretty much out of the normal interpretations of the Christian worldview. So it's kind of just what I've been thinking of, man. I've just been going over that loop, literally like laying awake in bed thinking about it like all the time. Okay, so now we have a few variables. We're going to do something interesting on the outside. We'll probably throw down a border. I'm thinking about their clothes right now because we're in a little bit of an interesting spot where we do have a lot of room. There's room up here, so I don't want to just cover it with a pattern, but we do need some kind of pattern. I could just throw down like a checkerboard or something in the dots. What I'm thinking is that we'll get pattern, and then something interesting. I'm kind of trying to think what I'm going to get the most mileage out of in terms of making an interesting visual situation. But I think I'm just going to throw down a quick, really, really light checkerboard with the dotted lines. And you can see that if you get to drawing a lot, using the dotted lines really gives you a lot of options, because even right now, I'm just putting this in lightly. So it's not going to be something that someone would look at the drawing and really notice, but it's going to add to the complex visual texture of it and make it more pleasing to look at. So see, just put that down while I was talking. It took like 2 sentences. But that's mostly what I've been thinking about, honestly. Also, I have some papers printed out. Sometimes I hit the academic stuff. That's a whole other thing we could talk about. I have some papers printed out about like creation from nothing, creation ex nihilo, as they say, and what the vibe on that is. The implications of that are kind of difficult for me. I mean, I know it's like a basic positive of almost any like monotheistic system, but the implications of that are kind of difficult for me because I posted about it on Twitter a little bit, but it means that basically everything is under God's control and purview, and he could have changed anything. So then we're kind of back at like the Calvinism thing, but I already said like I'm not accepting that. So it's kind of been interesting. I kind of hit a wall. I wonder what people think about this, if anyone has any experience with this, but like I kind of hit a wall a little bit with the academic, I don't want to call it criticism, but like the academic analysis of the Bible. Some people are obviously going to be like, well, why would you even look at that? Which I kind of sympathize with. But one of the most interesting conversations that I ever heard in terms of all the debates and all the things that I looked over was there's this guy, Steven Anderson. He's like the meme Baptist preacher guy online. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but like that's basically how he's presented. I know some people are Baptist here, so that's totally cool with me. And they probably would agree. So it's like if you wanted to know what like the most sort of extreme, I guess you could say, Baptist guy thought about something, you'd probably just pull up one of his sermons. And it was interesting because he talked to this guy I really like a lot named James White, who is a Calvinist and who's done a lot of work on KJV only people and the KJV only position. Because in case people don't know, maybe it's especially in America, I'm not really sure. I think it's especially in America. I don't know if it's uniquely in America. But there's people who are like, we only need the King James Version of the Bible. That's it. We literally don't need anything else. We're good. Like, this is the ultimate authoritative source of God's word. Okay, so I'm thinking that up here it would be kind of cool to put like a death, life kind of like symbol and stuff like that. Maybe like I don't want to put a skull because it's a baby, but my instinct is like something terrestrial and then something sky style. So maybe that's just what we'll do. Maybe I'll just put a cloud with the sun up here. I really like in drawings using a space and then making it a window. So I think that's what I'll do. We'll put a sky up here and like an earth reaching down into the darkness down here. We won't put a skull in, but it'll be like the implication of earthly stuff. And I'm just going to draw it in really tight with the dotted lines. And I'm doing that because I want to make sure I retain what I would call the visual hierarchy here. I want to make sure that the two babies and the women stay as the peak of the visual hierarchy. That you look at this and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to look there. Boom, that's like the most important part. And then when I put the sun in, I'm going to come in with like a really, really tight dotted line. Anyway, so like I was saying, I don't think I've talked about this on here before, but one of the most interesting talks I heard was between those two guys. James White, who's like, yeah, I've hardcore studied the Bible and all these manuscripts, and I'm Protestant, and he might even be at like a Baptist church or something. I don't think so, but he's not like, you know, radically different from that in terms of certain surface level things, let's say. He was talking with this other guy who's like, yeah, I literally just read the KJV Bible and that's like my vibe. That's it, basically. And they had this conversation and it was so interesting because they weren't that different, but they were like worlds apart also. And it was super interesting. And the most interesting part of it was when they got to the subtextual question of, you know, it wasn't like explicit, but basically it was like, you know, do we need academic interpretations of the Bible? Do we need these people to tell us what to think? And they were talking about the Jewish interpretation of certain aspects of Scripture. And James White was like, well, yeah, like in the Hebrew, this is what this means. And, you know, this Jewish concept, X, Y, Z. And then Stephen Anderson was like, well, why would I want to listen to the Jewish interpretation of something? I mean, if they interpreted the Bible correctly, they would see that the Old Testament like foreshadows Christ, right? Wouldn't they? Like, and they kind of hit a wall. And actually, James White was like, okay, I think we're done with this conversation. And Stephen Anderson was like, oh, dude, but come on. Like, I feel like we're just getting interesting. Like, isn't that true? I mean, if these groups that you're appealing to correctly interpreted the Old Testament from the Christian position, wouldn't they understand that it's about Christ anyway? So, like, why would I take their testimony about what this is supposed to mean? And they really hit a wall. And I thought it was so interesting because, you know, you can almost see it from like both sides in a way. Like, on the one hand, to say, well, we don't need to know anything about like these Hebrew terms and what they mean is probably going to leave you in the dark on some things, obviously. Yet if you're really coming hard from like the Christian position, well then, yeah, the Old Testament is about Jesus. And then if someone's position totally doesn't recognize that, then yeah, I mean, why would you put like a ton of stock into that? So it's super interesting. And I've been hitting that a lot because, you know, you hit these like academic, basically, like I was saying, interpretations of Scripture. And I don't know if people know, but there is like a critical theory, I guess you could say. I don't think it's directly related, but it kind of is, aspect to looking at Scripture and what they'll do. One of my favorite examples is like in Genesis, for example. They'll basically come in and say, well, look, this is written by multiple authors, and you can tell because of these word changes and these grammar changes. So in order to really understand this, you have to recognize that, you know, here we have the guy who's writing it using the term Elohim, and here's the guy who's writing it using the term Yahweh, and they're different. And this guy probably is trying to get across these like priestly principles. Maybe he's like a high priest, so he's emphasizing these aspects of God. And this other guy, maybe he's you know, X, Y, and Z, so he's emphasizing these aspects of God. And it's interesting because, I don't know, it kind of like shatters the text, right? It kind of just shatters it and makes it so, oh, I can't just sit down and read this, you know, in the way that I naturally would. I have to like take into account these like weird external factors that like, is this really true? Is there really like evidence for this? Like, I don't know. It kind of just seems like a theory someone came up with. Anyway, we can keep talking about that, but it is interesting. I'm going to throw a border down over here. I want to make sure we finish in our time frame because we do have a time frame and I haven't been looking at the chat, but I will in 1 second. So what I'm going to do right now, sometimes when I have these angular borders, it's kind of nice to throw down a bump where they meet. And you can see right here, it's not perfect, but I actually am leaning into the hand-drawn imperfect aspect of this. So all those imperfections, you can just roll with them. That's part of why I wanted to do this stream, is because part of the impetus for the whole show in the beginning was, you know, you can just grab a pen and just draw something cool, basically. Doesn't really matter if it's perfect or not. If you just roll with it, you'll end up with something kind of cool. I'm going to bring the camera out a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. Cool, cool. Because we're going to throw down some stuff on the outside. Yeah, let's do it. I don't know what we're going to do with this white space here. We could tone it, and then it will have the women be in the white in the foreground. I feel like we should put something interesting here, but I'm not totally sure what. So for now, really quickly, if anyone asks me any questions and I didn't see them, just ask me again. Otherwise, I'm kind of torn. I'm thinking about deploying these roses. I kind of always use those. Let's do it a little bit differently. Let's put these lilies on the outside, but we'll make them like these kind of fat lilies. In fact, you probably won't even be able to tell they're lilies because they'll be so up against the bumps. But even if it's just kind of an abstract shape, it does look nice. Now I'm experimenting a little bit. Perfect. So we'll just throw down this kind of like lily shape. Lilies are obviously used to represent the Virgin Mary because they're white, they're pure, they're just lovely. And I like that shape a lot. That pointy onion dome shape. Get a lot of like stylistic mileage out of that. Throw this down over here. How are we on time? Nice. It's 34 minutes. I almost put on music when I started the stream, but I thought it would be too crazy. Maybe next time we do this, I will. Okay, we're coming around here. Boom. And actually, you can kind of see one other maybe drawing principle that'll be illustrated here is, obviously this is very imperfect, but I think actually the imperfection lends a sort of like electric quality to it. It's almost like difficult to describe, but I really do think the imperfection adds like a very human element. And since we're just going for it off the cuff, let's do like an interesting border here. So what I'm going to do, I'm a little bit torn. There's two choices we have. I think I'm going to do this one. So use the term electric, where it's a bump, and then you get the four bumps, and then you get the four bumps, get the bump. So we have the big pendant, small pendant, big pendant, small pendant. And we're just going to come around. It looks really detailed, but it doesn't take that long. And eventually as you're drawing, especially if you're a more kind of motif, stylistically inclined illustrator like myself, you pick up these little motifs and you can use them in different combinations. That's part of why I recommend people look at a lot of traditional art, because I remember, you know, I'd go to the museum and it's like you see a motif like this, and wherever you're at in terms of your like visual advancedness, sometimes you see one and you're like, boom, I got that. I stored it in my brain, and it becomes part of your arsenal, and you can deploy it all the time. And you get variations on it. See, it already looks pretty dope. It has this kind of like shimmery quality. That is the technical term. So we'll come around here. It doesn't matter if it meets up or not. I'm kind of going a little bit quickly because I want to come back and beef up this border. And if we add one or two details, it'll get really cool. I normally don't do the hyper like detailed drawings on the stream. Since we're taking an atypical episode here, I thought it'd be worthwhile. The first few episodes I did of the show, we did, and it took literally forever, way longer than this. And we got to like, 45 minutes and I hadn't even like basically put anything down on the page. So it's been an interesting aspect of developing things here. Have you read any Michael S. Heiser? Someone asked me. Evangelical, he uses a lot of critical theory, but ends up in a pretty traditional reading. Dude, to be totally honest with you, I do not know what to make of Michael Heiser's work at all. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so I'm also going to come back in and just add these bumps underneath the large ones. And you'll see that eventually what we're going to get is these details start to become more than the sum of their parts. That's like a great art principle to have in your mind. Things become more than the sum of their parts. That guy that asked me about psychedelics, he said he was a musician. I think in music, that's when it's the most obvious. You have a band together, and you have a bass player and a guitar player and a drummer. And when they're all playing together, it's more than just the guitar and bass and drums added together like 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. You really get like 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. It's like there's something extra there that can't be reduced to just the parts, and that's what I'm going to try and make happen right here. So what I'm going to do for the border, I'm going to do a little bit of a trick that I sometimes do. It's not really a trick, but what you do is you come into these empty spaces and you fill them out, and we're going to do it twice. And by doing that, what we're going to get is a little bit of a shimmering kind of like visual effect. So we'll come in with these big cross bumps here. I had one stylistic choice that I made while I was talking where I had to decide if I was going to angle these on the angled side, but I said no. I think it's kind of cool when your eye can just run over them and they're all vertical the same way regardless of, we put one back here too, the turning. So for example right here, I could have made it an X instead of a plus, but I didn't. And then outside them, I'm going to put a smaller circle, and scaling those details adds kind of like a natural element to the drawing. I might have picked that up from like really, really small Persian miniatures and stuff like that, but they do that really well. And then when I went back, I started to see that in nature. One of my favorite natural examples of that is if you look at any plant that grows on a stem or has a bunch of buds or something like that growing from a central life source, they'll naturally taper off and get smaller as you get to the further away from like the life source. Sounds really abstract, but maybe a fern or something like that is an easy example, or a leaf, or like leaves on a tree. The ones closer to the root on a fern, for example, will be larger, and then they get smaller and smaller progressively as you move away. And then this will be the last little bit. So I'm going to add, I added too many here. I actually added 2 by accident. I should have just added 1. That's not a big deal. I'm going to come in and add these circles around the outside. Cool. I might have to zoom out a little bit, just really quick. Oh man, hold on one second, sorry. Just got to get the camera to stay. That should be perfect. This looks dope. Cool, I'm glad we did like a heavy drawing episode here. So I'm going to come in and just add these circles. And I might just go really hard on the border because I said we'd do this for an hour and we have a minute. I think it's kind of cool to see it go all the way through. And people doodle, you know, doodling is a pretty like inherently human thing to do. But even that, you can, you know, get better at it over time because you learn to control more and more variables. Perfect. Okay. Oh yeah, so Michael Heiser, in case people don't know, I would love to hear what someone thinks about his work, because basically what it's all about, in my opinion, I don't want to reduce it all to one thing, but for me, it's the main thing is the divine counsel. So what he does is he goes in, and in a few parts of the scripture, Psalms, Deuteronomy maybe, he comes in, okay, cool. All right, since we came this far on the, I didn't do the bottom yet. Since we came this far on the border, I am just going to take it all the way there because there's 1 or 2 more things I would quickly do. So I'm going to take back the bigger one here. Perfect. And I'm going to add 3, 4. Over every plus, I'm going to add these dots. 2, 3, 4. These 4s. And it'll just add a last little visual layer on the outside. It's totally worth it. Anyway, yeah, so his whole work is about like the divine counsel, and basically what he does is digs into these certain aspects of scripture. He's a pretty impressive guy linguistically. I think he actually can read like Ugaritic tablets and stuff. There's not that many people that can do that. Anyway, and basically he builds this world, this whole case, I guess you could say, that within scripture is this divine counsel, and God is kind of like the head of the gods. To dumb it down, it's kind of like a Mount Olympus kind of situation. That would be me like dumbing it down to the maximum extent. But it talks about, you know, we should do this and counsel of the gods. I feel like it's Psalm 82 that he's always talking about or something like that. He has 2 verses that he's always talking about in interviews. 2 chapters. Anyway, put 1 more big dot as we come around. Perfect. Perfect. Come around here. Boom, boom, boom. And when I'm doing this, in case it's not obvious, I'm just putting the new piece in between the last piece. So I'm putting it in between each 4 dots, I'm putting 1 dot. And you feel like it wouldn't make that much of a difference, but I think it does. Anyway, it's super interesting, but I don't know what to make of it. And extra weird is that when I read the Joseph Smith commentary and stuff, Joseph Smith has the same thing. He has basically like a divine council in his view of the cosmos, and it was right after I hit all the Michael Heiser stuff, and it was really creepy. I was like, whoa, why are both these guys saying the same thing? Okay, anyway, so yeah, this border looks sick. I really like it a lot. So I'm really glad we did that on the stream, because you could see how it goes from really simple to really complicated, and it just kind of happens, and you get good at doing it. So also, just take a little detour here. The pluses, for example, this is a really good concrete example of something I'm always trying to show on the stream. So I'm glad we came here. Each one of these little features in here, you can dig in more and more and more, and you learn to tweak more and more variables. So for example, perfect example is, if I had this like in my sketchbook, let's say, and I was really just working on it for a long time or doing like a finished drawing, these pluses, what I might do sometimes is just throw in a dark petal between them. And that just adds a little bit of an oomph. What's in here, even for the border itself, instead of doing it this way, which gives it kind of like an electric feel, and like we talked about, that's why we did it this way. But you can also do it this way, a little bit more of like a Baroque, kind of like Byzantine feel. You can get these, I don't know what to call them. I think of them as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like fleur-de-lis. And then in here, you can come in and put in, whatever, put it in another shape. You could even come behind. Sometimes what I would do is, let's say you have whatever it is. You can come in and put bumps and then accentuate those. So now you have another layer going on. And each one of these variables, you can tweak to an almost like infinite extent. And that's a really good illustration of what happens when you get better at drawing. You just reach further, further, further in and tweak more and more and more and more and more subtle variables. Nice, Peter M in the chat. He's got a wrench. That's the original. That means you're the original status here. It's been a minute since I was able to join live. How's life going? It's great, man. I'm stressed about the baby, but not in an undue way. Excited. I'm in the nursery right now. It's going really well, man. I got a closet full of baby clothes. Honestly, in terms of my life, this is a perfect little encapsulation of what my life is like right now. I'm trying to work all the time. And I'm going around and I'm grabbing papers and I'm pens, and then there's 3 closets over here in this little weird space in my house. And I opened the wrong closet and there's just baby clothes right there. There's like little boys' clothes just sitting right there at eye level, and every time I do that, I see them and I'm like, whoa. Like I have this total moment of like mental blankness of like, oh yeah, whoa. Not that I forgot, but like, whoa, like there's little boys' clothes. And they're tiny clothes. Like I could put the shirt on the screen right now. It's so small. It's a really good image of what my life is like. I'm hustling around, trying to solve a million problems, and I open this closet and I see like little baby like navy shorts. And I'm like, wow. Total mind blank. Okay, anyway, thanks for asking. Okay, so I want to make sure we're closing in. I called this the speedrun edition, and I have to go to a family thing soonish, not too soon, but so let's say we got like 15 minutes here, and I want to make sure we do this, intelligently. We have this space right here. I love solving visual problems on the stream with you guys. So we have this visual here, this space here. We've got a few things going on here. We can slow down the car for a second. We got a few things going on here. We could get some blackness in here, the black, but then we're going to start to fuzz out the clear visual hierarchy that we presently have. Right now, it's pretty clear that the black, and I'm actually probably going to come back in, and I'm just going to darken in these brains because the babies are almost not getting lost, but they're not really having their proper visual hierarchy right now. So I'm just going to come in and black these in. Cool. That looks way better actually already. So up here we could come in. I think what I'm going to do is just like a sparse version of this bump pattern we have on the outside. I kind of want to put something in here because I don't like to just let a visual space go to waste, but I don't know what it would be. You know, I'm thinking a lightning bolt would look really cool in here, but just between us, that would be like basically meaningless. Oh, we talked about the slain snake. Oh, dude, that would be sick. Okay, this is perfect actually, for a variety of reasons. I'm just gonna draw while we're talking. So I mentioned before, you know, I drew the hearts in the babies, and I said, wow, we're gonna have to like toughen that up a little bit. I really do have that. Whenever I hit a detail and it's a little bit too cute, I do feel like, oh, I have to. I can't just let that roll that cute. We have to balance it out a little bit. So this is something I like doing. I like hiding a detail in the picture that makes it a little bit more intense than it is at first glance. Perfect example is someone who's on my Patreon got me a while ago to make an image of the archetype of the warrior poet. You know, he's like, I don't say what he does, doesn't matter. You know, he's a gun guy and he likes writing, so it's like a warrior poet together, right? So I made this whole image, and it's pretty cool, you know, lots of more writing stuff. But then off to the side, I had just like a hand sticking in that was up, and there was like blood on the hand, like some like slain soldier or something. And it was cool because you see the image at first and you read it and you're like, oh, I get it. But then you see that one detail and it almost changes how you read everything else. Really like doing that if possible. So I'm going to hide this like cut up snake back here. If you've been here the whole time, we talked about framing this in the cut up snake because someone mentioned snake in the comments. But I think that this is a little bit cooler. We'll just have this like cut up, you know, pieces of the snake back here. And it won't be, you know, the first thing you see when you look at the picture, so maybe it lets you look in a little bit. And it also lets me push the shading a little bit because I mentioned maybe having blood from the snake and that done in an interesting way. And I'm just going to make it kind of like pooling out of the snake around here. That's just what we're going to do. Like maybe it's not really clear that it's blood. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But we'll just kind of shade it in. That'll let us get a little visual contrast back here. Not too much though. Oh, this is such a perfect detail. Because also what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in. I can't tell if I should do this or not, but I'm going to. And I'm going to add really tight. This, we might lose some of the legibility here, but I thought it'd be worth it. I'm just going to add the scale pattern. You need the scale pattern on there. Oh, perfect. Perfect. So that's basically, I'm really glad we walked through this whole thing. Cool. If you're coming in at the end, I was saying that since I was doing an atypical episode, I wanted to do drawing instead of painting, but I think this works really well. And now what we're going to do is, I can't tell if I should highlight it, like I could come around with like a really light border. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this pattern that kind of naturally formed with the rings coming out. And what I'm going to try and do, the way I'm going to, I guess you could say, hide this detail, I'm going to be toying a little bit with losing the legibility. It's okay though, it's not a big deal. I'm going to try and have the density of these dots be very, very similar to the lines. And it's kind of going to have the effect of like if you drew something in red and then shaded red all around it. It's not that it gets lost, but it does blend in a little bit more. Perfect, perfect, perfect. This is a cool one. This is a cool one. I use a cedar tree here, by the way. I was talking, but in Renaissance art symbolism, a cedar tree is used to represent mortality. I have this book, I recommend it all the time. It's called Signs and Symbols in Renaissance Art. It's actually called Signs and Symbols in Christian Art by this guy named Ferguson. And I have like the passage about it memorized. It's like just 2 sentences, but it says, a cedar tree represents this because if you cut down a cedar tree, it doesn't regrow. And I always think, isn't that true for a lot of trees? Do all the trees regrow if you cut them down? Oh, that's perfect. Look, that perfectly encapsulates it because you look at this, you see this. We got a good, really good visual hierarchy here. Boom, your eye comes here because of the high contrast. And then in the background, maybe you look around and then eventually you might notice the cut up snake. You probably would just notice the head and then you might notice the other bits. I could come back and outline a little bit more, but I don't want to. Okay, it's looking pretty good right now. I'm going to look away for a second, maybe add some more detail, but I think we might be done. I'm going to look away and then look back. You always have to look away and then look back. Let's see if we got any good questions. What time is it right now? 4:40. Perfect. I wanted to wrap it up in like 10 minutes. We'll probably wrap it up a little bit less though. Okay, quick questions. Any advice on getting your stuff out there online as a weird RW Christian artist? Good meta question about art. Honestly, man, it's interesting because I will riff on that for a second. So maybe if I go too long, it might be the last question. But yeah, it's interesting, man, because there's all different kind of aspects of that question. Like things you might say or think that could get you in trouble. You have to like toe that line yourself, or decide where you're drawing the line yourself. Sometimes I mention the book of Daniel, and it's like one exposition I heard of it where it's like, long story short, you go to Babylon and maybe you wear the clothes, maybe you take a Babylonian name, but at the end of the day they're going to realize that you're not like doing the whole Babylonian thing, and you're going to catch attention for it. So that's something you have to figure out yourself. But more to the thrust of the question you asked me. It's interesting because I feel like all the advice that I got about getting your stuff out there, not that I'm like wildly successful, but I do my thing. Basically, I kind of did the opposite. I feel like things that make you are what is going to get people interested in what you're doing. It sounds like the advice is like, just be yourself. It's not exactly what I mean though. It's more that, whatever draws you to art and your craft is probably something that other people can't explicate for you, and deep embedded in there is going to be what lets people come to your thing that you're doing and get something out of it. So like for me, for example, even in the very beginning, I was really into like patterns and trippy visuals and weird stuff like MC Escher, like the two hands drawing each other. And I didn't really know why. At that time, I couldn't really explicate why that was, but it took me a really, really long time to understand, that's partially because I'm into like meta systems and ideas and, self-referential structures and what that says about information and thinking. And it took me a really long time to realize, actually, like I really like the way visual stuff conveys ideas. I thought maybe, I just like religious art, maybe just because it looks good. But then I, over time, realized, it's actually the ability of these art and the artifacts to carry a whole worldview and style, and the way a visual style carries things about a culture. Again, I probably couldn't articulate it at the time, but that's partially because I find peoplehood very interesting, and like people and how we are all part of a people and how that colors how we see things. And anyway, it doesn't really matter about me, but I'm saying for you, if you sat down and look at your stuff, you could probably find stuff like that. Like maybe, I don't know, here's a random example. Maybe you like drawing animals a lot, and that's maybe on a deeper level because you're really into, how things are built. And maybe that shows, what God thinks about when he makes like a Komodo dragon and how it shows like the hand of the creator or something. Or, so basically like, it's kind of a huge question, but what draws you to your craft, if you keep going deeper and deeper into that, then it makes it easier for people to get something out of what you're doing, because you're sort of letting them into your world. My model for making art is kind of like mad scientist style. You have this lab, and then every now and then you open the door. And I think I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but I like that model, because then when you open the door, people are like, whoa, this is cool. This is cool and interesting. I hope people feel that way about me. Some people don't, but some people do. But yeah, you can hit me up. You can DM me if you want, but basically that would be it. It would be like, go deeper into what makes you want to do art, and that will be a constantly fecund well that you can always draw from. And other people can draw from it too then. Okay, perfect question to ask me at the very end, because we're done now. Okay, cool. That was kind of a quick one. Not too quick, but I always feel like I need to recap at the end, but we don't need to. I'm glad we did like a hardcore drawing one. Maybe we'll do some more drawing ones. I can't exactly tell. I always feel like the detailed patterns would take too long, but it didn't really take that long. We're actually not even in an hour yet. So maybe we'll do more drawing ones, but I'm glad we did that, man. If you were here live, thanks for coming through. Everyone that's here right now, thanks for coming through for the rainy day afternoon session. Wow, we got as many people as we normally do at the scheduled time. Maybe I should just wing it every week. No, I'm just kidding. Peter M says, excited for you. Owen Barrowan is and will be a true blessing to you and your wife, I'm sure. Thanks, man. Thanks. That's it's very cool. People like my stuff and like what I'm doing and get something out of it. Just tagging on to the last answer there. Anyway, let's wrap it up. That's basically it. That's the whole story, man. I hope you enjoy your evening. If you really follow the studio really hard, it's been insane the last 2 weeks because I've had people in town, which never happens. But after this week, I'm going to get back to kind of normal vibe. Maybe you haven't noticed or anything, but as the broadcaster, it always feels like people are like, "Oh my God, Owen didn't post a comic in the last 3 days. I'm going to freaking find him and break his phone." But anyway, thanks for coming through. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll catch you guys on the internet where we all hang out together. I'll see you guys